As you begin this journey of improving your ability to give speeches, I wanted to take a moment to briefly consider the history of public speaking and specifically of public speaking classes, just so that you have an idea of where we're situated in history. As a class as we know it, and even a communication studies degree as we know it, it's relatively young. It's within the past century that we started studying communication in the way that we are studying it today. However, public speaking has a long-standing tradition. Years and years, centuries of individuals trying to figure out how to be more persuasive speakers. It really goes back as far as Aristotle, Plato, Gorgias, all of those originals, what we would call rhetors, who analyzed how to make speech more persuasive. And it really is interesting to consider why it started. Really what it was is as soon as civilization got to where individuals were going to court to maybe sue one another or to prove that someone did something illegal, individuals realized that if they could be more persuasive in their arguments, they could get more of what they wanted out of these court systems. And so individuals like these rhetors would hire themselves out as persuasive speakers, what today we might call lawyers, to help individuals get out of sticky situations. And that's why today lawyers and the term rhetorician may have a sort of negative connotation, because often we think of them in terms of these individuals trying to weasel themselves out of a bad situation. But rhetoric itself is actually really interesting, because anytime we're trying to persuade someone to do something, we're engaging in rhetoric. In fact, as a teacher, I engage in rhetoric all the time. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to persuade my audience to think differently, or to believe something, or to accept new information as fact. So we're going to explore what we call the rhetorical situation today, look at how that affects our speech-making process. Before we get into the actual rhetorical process, I want to talk about my goal for you this semester. My goal is for you to become competent communicators. Now, in the textbook, you'll often see effective speakers, and you'll hear that throughout the world. In fact, you'll hear people say, I want you to be an effective speaker, or I'm trying to be a more effective speaker. And effective is one small part of it, but really I want you to see a bigger picture. I want you to be competent. Being a competent speaker requires you to be effective, appropriate, and ethical. So effective is, did I accomplish my goal? If my goal is to persuade my audience to buy something, did they buy it? Well, if so, then I was effective. If not, I was ineffective. So effective, did I accomplish my goal? But I also want you to be appropriate, right? Appropriate is, did I match the social norms of the situation, right? Have you ever had a family member try to use the fact that you're related to them to get you to buy something, right? That's not really appropriate. You might buy it because you feel pressure to do it. And so, yeah, they could be effective, but not necessarily appropriate. So we want to be both appropriate and effective. And we also want to be ethical. And ethical is when we're making sure that we don't cross any moral boundaries, right? So coercion, using blackmail, stuff like that, just not very ethical. So we want to avoid that. My goal this semester is for you to be ethical, appropriate, and effective. All right, so let's talk about this rhetorical situation. The basic idea here is that when you give a speech, you are not giving a speech in a vacuum. You're giving a speech as part of a broader situation. So the speech-making process, it really starts when you understand this rhetorical situation. What I want you to do is imagine that you are going to a party, and maybe you're walking in about 30 minutes late. And by the time you walk in, people have already clumped off into small groups. So you've got a group of 5 people here, a group of 3 people over here, and a group of 2 people over here. As you walk in as the newcomer, you don't just walk in and butt into one of those groups and start telling your own story. That would be inappropriate. The appropriate thing to do, especially in a professional setting, would be to insert yourself into one of those groups and to listen for a little bit and see what they're already talking about. And then once you understand what they're already saying and you feel like you have something appropriate to add to the conversation, then you jump in and begin talking. Okay? It's the same thing when we give speeches. Even though you might be the only speaker at a given event, that topic has already been talked about for a long time, and you're actually joining a larger conversation. And so that's why before you give your speech, you need to spend some time doing some research, finding what other people have already said. Because if you give up and give a speech that says exactly what people have already said, you're not going to look very intelligent. So you need to study and see what other people have said, and then figure out how you can join the conversation in an appropriate way. So rhetoric is very simply stated, it's the ability to influence. So any attempt to influence is rhetoric. Specifically, we look at times when we're trying to influence thinking, feelings, or behaviors of our audience. So we had those original Greek philosophers who really started this tradition of rhetoric and these strategies that we use to try to persuade or influence individuals. The rhetorical situation suggests that when we speak, we are speaking in the context of these 6 primary elements. So 6 things that influence what we say and how what we say affects our audience. So we have the occasion, the speaker, the audience, the purpose, the context, and the content and the delivery. So we're going to walk through each one of these. The occasion. So anytime you're giving a speech at a certain time, at a certain location, maybe a certain event. Are you speaking at a funeral? Are you speaking at a graduation ceremony? Because of these occasions, or more modernly, we call them genres, because these occasions have expectations surrounding them, your audience is coming to them with specific ideas of what they think you're going to say, or at least how they think you're going to say it. So it's important for you as a speaker to make sure that you know what the expectations are so that you can match them, right? Just like it'd be inappropriate for you to start your speech at a funeral with a joke, right? It would also be inappropriate for you to start your celebratory speech in a very solemn manner, right? So we have to match the occasion. You as a speaker also have a huge influence on this speaking event. Think about your background, your history, your personality, how you portray yourself. All these things influence the speech itself. Have you ever noticed that you could have one teacher tell you something and another teacher tell you the exact same thing and you respond differently to them? Well, likely that's because you have different emotional responses to the teachers. And those emotional responses that the teachers give you change how you interpret their feedback to you. So you as a speaker need to be aware of what you're portraying and what your personality is and what your background is so that you can understand how you're going to influence your audience. And that's the next part of this rhetorical situation, the audience. The audience is also coming with a background and a history. They're not just blank slates coming to hear you for the first time. They're coming probably with an idea already of what their opinion is on your topic. They have past histories with it. Maybe even they're coming to your speech and they're hungry and they're distracted by the fact that they're hungry. Or maybe on their way to your speech, their girlfriend or boyfriend broke up with them, and so they're distracted in that way. So your audience also is bringing different variables that influence how they're going to react to your speech. Your speech purpose is also really important. What is your goal as a speaker? In this class, we're going to do a couple of different speeches where your goal is different. For example, in the informative speech, your goal is simply to inform. That is your purpose, to inform us, to teach us something. But in the persuasive speech, your goal is to get us to change our beliefs or our actions. So your purpose changes based off of what the goal is of the speech. Your content also matters. This tends to be where a lot of speakers spend most of their time. This is the speech writing part. What goes into your speech? What stories do I tell? What facts do I include? How do I organize my speech? You can strategically do things to make it so that your content is more persuasive. And by the way, even if you're just giving an informative speech, you're trying to persuade. You're trying to persuade your audience to accept your new information. So you're always trying to think of ways to change your content so that your audience is more ready to accept it. And then we have delivery. Delivery is how you portray the information. So this could be everything from your body movement to your vocal intonations. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about this semester. But it also includes channel, right? So are you giving a video? Are you standing in person in front of these people? Are you having to yell to get your message out, or can you talk quietly? All these things influence how your message is received. So this is the rhetorical situation. Go ahead and take a moment to consider how our upcoming speeches, your introduction speech, fit into this rhetorical situation. Think through, what is the occasion? How are you, the speaker, going to influence this? Who is the audience? How is that going to influence this? What is the purpose? What is your content? And how can you prepare your delivery?